let's move on to the rank, and I feel like this one's a long time coming. Um, Ranks. It was originally rank and responsibility, but now we're gonna go through the ranks of the islands in the system. And two, I may have misrepresented your idea in the agenda. I apologize for that. So I'm going to turn it over to you to give us official liftoff with that topic.
When I brought up this topic, I said rank and responsibility because I wanted to compare the ranks between cultures, not like the ranks of which island is better than the other, but
Right.
the similar ranks that we have in all of our islands. I mean, we have chiefs, we have, and like for Fiji, we have the chief, the Tui. And right now, one thing that one issue that keeps cropping up every once in a while is who is really a chief and what makes them a chief, or who comes under what rank and what gives them the right to claim that rank. So therefore, I'd like to open this discussion to everyone, starting with chief and any other rank that comes right after. In my experience, what I've seen thus far in history is normally chiefs are also descended from those who arrived first. It's either they're the ones who arrived first or conquered those who came first, and thereby thereafter took the title. What happens after that is those who come later, they come and stay under the protection of the current chief. In gratitude, they give tribute to the person who has granted them protection. What about Tonga? How does one, or what would give a person the strongest claim? In Fiji, it's if you can trace directly to the either the conqueror or the one who arrived first, but whoever is agreed upon as the ranking chief back then.
Okay, so I'm gonna start the top tippity top, the Tu'itonga. In prior to the I think it was the 1840s. The Tu'itonga was the end all be all in Tonga. The Tu'itonga. So it's kind of like one of those things where you might have a saying in English where there's like a literal meaning and then also it has like a separate figurative meaning. So like in Tongan, Tu'itonga literally just means the king of Tonga. But the Tu'itonga was also a dynasty in of itself that wasn't just any king of Tonga. It was like specifically that lineage that traced all the way back to Tangaloa Eiki. So the story goes that Tangaloa Eiki came down to Tonga and found a beautiful woman, just like in all the Greek legends, but this time it was a Tongan woman. Actually, some stories say she was a Tongan woman. Some stories say that she was a Samoan woman. Some stories, I've even heard one story say she was a Niuean woman, like from Niue. But anyway, her name was Va'epopua. And Va'epopua, they had a kid. Tangaloa and Va'epopua had a kid. And that kid was Aho'eitu. And Aho'eitu was basically a demigod, but he was the first Tu'itonga. And what happened was, according to the legends, Aho'eitu climbed using the giant toa tree, which is like the ironwood tree, climbed all the way to Langi and tried to find his father once he realized who his father was, obviously. And he ended up finding his brothers. His brothers were all actual gods, they're full gods, and they didn't like the fact that he was a demigod, so they killed him and ate him. And Tangaloa Eiki actually brought him back to life, and in that started the Tu'itonga, Aho'eitu, and then all of his brothers from then on became like the first of the subservient other chiefs, like the other royal clans. So like the Ha'atakalawa and Ha'avakatolo and all those people. And I don't remember, I think he had 6 brothers maybe, so there's like the different titles. And then also after that, throughout history, other Tongan chiefs have created different like lines. Tu'ikano Kupolu, which is a line that's between Tongan and Samoa, which is why it says Kano Kupolu, which means like the flesh of Upolu, because the Samoan side came from Upolu. There's like different the Ma'atu, Tu'i Ma'atu, which is one of the governors appointed by the Tu'itonga. The Ha'atakalawa, eventually, those are the people who sort of handled like the secular things, like non-religious things. And the Tu'itonga himself, because it was descended from a god, was basically for more religious and ceremonial aspects of life. Basically, it was sort of like the two houses, and that is kind of what caused problems later down the line, because there's all these different dynasties and all these different like high chiefs, and eventually that needed to happen was the introduction of the Europeans sort of ignited the fire, and that's what caused the civil war in Tonga. Not caused the civil war, but kind of prodded and poked the civil war, made it even worse than it was. And that's why Tupo Taha, or at that time Taufa'ahau, basically took that upon himself as the Tu'ikano Kupolu to fight the Tu'itonga, because he didn't believe in the whole like the ancient religion anymore. So he took him out, and then once he actually won the civil war, he abolished the Tu'itonga line. So nowadays, the king of Tonga, the Tu'itonga, just based on like the actual language, is the Tu'ikano Kupolu, and that's descended from Taufa'ahau Taha. And all the chiefs below him, or all the chiefs below them, because it can be a king or a queen, the Kano Kupolu, as you've seen with Salo Te Tupo. They're all basically like, a lot of them are still remain from the Tu'itonga days, like Ha'atakalawa and Ha'akame and all those. Yeah, and basically Ha'a means like clan, so that's what the dynasty is, like a Ha'a. And they each have like a different name and different origin, different purpose. A lot of them were appointed as governors for different areas, rather than they were. So basically, they're like what Tu was saying, like the conquerors, rather than like the first people there. And after so that's like the top people. Then you have like the nobles, the Ho'eki, and like the like the Hau, which are the high chiefs. Then you have the Matapure, and Matapure are like talking chiefs and like the orators. I'm not 100% on why they have like this like two different houses, basically, like why they would have like the Hau, and then also the Matapure, like the talking chief. I think it's because for certain situations the chief wouldn't talk, and he would have like the Matapure talk for him. Like you see in the Tama Fakava, Lawaki and Motu Apuaka talk for Tu'ikano Kupolu instead of like himself talking to the crowd. And then basically, yeah, so that's like the lower level chiefs. And then you have like the individual villages, which all have like a role in Tonga that connect to the king and the country. And within each village, there's different roles, like the Five Fika, which is the priest. Then you have like Five To'o, which are the people who do like medicine, like the healers and all that. And then you have the families, and the families have their own stratification, like the hierarchy. So you have like the Fahu, and you have like the Ulunganga and Mehikitanga and all those people, all the way down to like the kids. So it's basically like Tonga is like one huge ladder of hierarchy from top to bottom, and each has its own like purpose and its own place and its own role in maintaining this super complex machine that is Tonga society. And it all has to do with like the idea of tauhiwaha, which is like to maintain social space and like maintain relations between different members of a society in order to maintain the harmony of the society.
You talk about the King of Tonga coming from a deity, but how about from God to human? How about from human to God? You remember how we were talking about for some of those mythological characters that we have, especially in Fijian stories like Ndakuanga and such, how they may have started up as just very dominant chiefs
Oh yeah,
who,
yeah,
when
yeah.
they died, had their stories continued.
Okay, so that's actually something that I've heard before. That is a theory. I don't know if it's like a widely accepted theory, but I'll go into it. So, from what I've heard from some people, they actually think that Tangaloa was actually Samoan, and they think Tangaloa Eiki was like the Tui Manu'a, and that's why they treated him as a god, because the Tui Manu'a was the rulers of Tonga before the Tui Tonga, and that's why it was like a shift of power, possibly from Samoa to Tonga at the time. So I don't know how true that might be. I haven't seen very much evidence for or against it, but it's an interesting theory.
From what I've read about the Tongan Empire, they say it stretched over Samoa, but only until the realm of Tuimanua.
Yeah, Tonga, like in the prime time of the Tonga Empire, it stretched from parts of Vanuatu and like Solomon Islands in the west all the way to Tokelau in the north, and then obviously Tonga and Fiji and Samoa in the south, and all the way to the east it went from Niue to part of the Cook Islands. So it was a vast stretch of land. And even beyond the actual parts that they directly ruled, they also had indirect control over other people. Like even Kiribati has influence from Tongan, like words and stuff. And Kiribati people have stories about Tongans, and even down to Kapinga Marangi, all the way in Federated States of Micronesia and Palau. There's a lot of like Tongan influence in all these different islands all across. In the article I sent to the group, the Talaki Uvea, I've had that book for a long time. I have the print copy in actual Uvean, and then I've just found like the English version of it. And I've read some of it, but I never got that far into the book. I got to around 200, like page 200, maybe a little bit before. And it was talking about the Hawaiians in Uvea and Tonga. And that was an interesting thing relating to the sphere of influence.
Mousy, gonna pass it over to you. Bring us to the Samoa Islands.
Alofa. As far as rank is concerned, from what I understand in Samoan hierarchy, basically each village has its own chief, and that would be the what we call it is the ali'isili, and the ali'isili is the one who sits atop, the entire pyramid of what is the government of the village. Underneath the ali'isili, you have a plethora of different levels. You have different tulafale, you have different matai. There's differences between tulafale and matai and their responsibilities. But basically, the very, very top is the ali'isili. Like I said before, the tulafale and different matai, and underneath those matai, you have our people, the taulelea, and the the untitled men and the women of the village and all of that. How the system looks as a pyramid. You have the son and daughter of the li'isili which would be the manaya and the aungafapai, and those would be the people in line to next take over the title. Well, actually, the son would be the next that would the next suli to take over the title from the li'isili. Other than that, I mean, Samoan hierarchy is very basic. I mean, everybody has like Nico said, they've all got their spot in the different facility of how we run each individual village government. And again, you could go really, really wide range on everything because we have what's called angay fanua. We have a basic set understanding of what the cultural customs are in the entire Samoa, and then each village, depending on its environment and what it has to deal with in its own specific situation, they have what's called angay fanua, which would be customs that relate only to this very village, but to keep it within time with restraints. Basically, you would have the Li'isili at the top and his Tula Fales below him, and then you would have the Matai who serve no real, they don't really serve a purpose within the entire village government, but what they do serve as is the heads of each family. So each family, it's interesting because within the entire village government, then you have kind of a family-based government in between those, and each each line would have its own chief called a sao, and that sao takes care of the family business within that line of that specific family, whether it be a Tula Fale or a talking chief family, or it be a Falikaba to the main Ali'i title of the village. And that's my basic understanding of those points. I hear a lot of mention of artisans and there are what we call artisans in Samoa. So you have what's called the tai, which is a title given to somebody who's really good at fishing. You have different, we have positions of fofo, we have positions of, the tattoo artists, the suluapes and tufunga and those guys. You have tufunga faifale and tufunga tapea. And so the tufunga, the ones that build homes and build things, and then you have the tufunga tapea, which is the one that does the tattooing. But those positions are not, so they're not given any direct, they're not given any direct authority within the village to have any say within the village government, but they are given respect because of their specific responsibilities that they're in charge of. And that's why they have, it's interesting because, each village has its own ali'isili, and that's considered kind of like the king of its own village. So what you have is the respect word for the people who are considered artisans, and they're called the angai tupu, which means that their talent can make them worthy to interact with the king. Angai tupu, angai tupu basically means that this is somebody who can go face to face with the king because of what knowledge that they have. Their own what do I want to say? Like their own personal specialty, whatever they're especially good at. That's the thing that's going to make them be able to, speak with the king on a king's level, because they're so good at this. They're so good at being able to, do all kinds of. They have a certain special knowledge within the culture that makes them important to the king because of because of the keeping of the culture and everything in harmony with the village. That they're able to be on the king with that level. So it's really, really interesting, at least for me. You have all these different facets, but the basic hierarchy of it is you would have at the top is Tula Fale. There is a position, there's different positions of Tula Fale in the village. Not all villages have every single position, but they do have different capacities. You have Tula Fale that's called the Tu'ua. The Tu'ua would be the oldest Tula Fale who has the most knowledge of different family relationships and different historical events that are of value in this specific village. But he may not be the Tula Fale who's exactly the high talking chief that would be speaking at every event, but he would be somebody that would be referred to every time somebody needs to give a speech. He would have all of the genealogical knowledge that we need here in the Tu'ua, rather than all of the Tula Fale who are working up to that point, they're going to go to the Tu'ua for reference and to get all of his wisdom, his gems of knowledge. Other than that, they have different positions called the Puna'o'o. There's Tula Toa. There's all kinds of different ways that you can be a Tula Fale, but all of them are in service, once again, of the Li'isili, which would be the highest chief of the village.
Roger that. Sorry to, Nico, I saw you had your hand up for a while there. Go ahead, brother. What you got?
Well, I was just gonna say, like, a lot of those titles aren't necessarily like, not titles, like your Angai Fonua and the Talatupua and all that. Those are exactly the same in Tongan and like have the same purpose in Tonga as well. That's all I have to do.
Awesome. Two.
Similar thing in Fiji, but right now what we have, pre-colonial times, it was Tikina, then down to the village setting, but that was more of Tikina Yavusa, and then Matangali and Tokotoka. Tokotoka being the family unit, and Matangali being more like a clan or such. So there were different kinds of chiefs, and you could tell by how their titles sounded. So you had the Tui, which is more like king, yes. And then you had Tokei, meaning the owner. So the head of a Matangali might go to his own land, and then he could call, and I believe it's more common in the West for them to call them Tokei of this or Tokei of that, to show that even though they come under chief, they also within they can operate as they like within the lands that's allotted to them. And for other than that, we also have the fishermen. I believe for fishermen we have one in Dao, and also for I think Matei Sau for the carpenters. And Matei Sau, funnily enough, our first boat builders that became famous all over the Pacific, that made Fiji famous all over the Pacific for our canoes, were from Tonga and Samoa. And after that, from their skill, our ancestors were able to build all these great ships that were the Nrua, the Zamakau, and all the such. But yeah, but I think if you go from the east of Fiji towards the central, you'll find a very strong Polynesian or maybe Tongan influence when it comes to the hierarchy.
Hey guys, yeah, just a quick question on Samoa and Tonga traditional hierarchy. Sorry for the noise, but right now, in present time, is the traditional hierarchy still being preserved during traditional or formal ceremonies, or is it just like Fiji, where just a certain few are there? For example, just the chief or the second in command and the warriors. Is it also the same for Samoa and Tonga, or Vidaka?
Jiko, you want to knock this one down first?
In Tonga, for like the larger any of like the ceremonial functions that have to do with the king or like any of the royals, all of the traditional protocol, all of like the traditional like hierarchy and traditional roles and stuff are still very much played out. Like the Tamafakava ceremony, I keep referencing this because probably one of the best examples of traditional Tongan culture still being practiced today, like in regards to the hierarchy. Basically, it's the royal kava ceremony, and in the royal kava ceremony, everybody from the king all the way down to the lowest commoner are represented in the kava circle, because each of the people or each of the commoners has a chief and like a noble and a royal that they're represented by, and all those people are within the kava circle. So it's basically like counting for the whole kingdom of Tonga. And basically what they'll do is they'll give like gifts to the king, or they'll pledge allegiance to the king or do any of these things. And that's basically when the matapure and like all like the hau and the ho'eiki from each of the different areas do so. It's pledging allegiance also for their people as well. So it's kind of like representatives in a modern democracy type of thing. And it's very much like literally every role is still accounted for. Like another example, during royal funerals, the lawaki is still the ha'ani matapu. They still sit outside of the grave for the first 100 days. They still rain, sun or shine. They still don't use their hands when they're when they have to do anything, they have to be fed, and they can't like do anything but or leave the circle for anything but like using the bathroom, and even then they have to have their oldest son sit in for them. So all of it is still very traditional in Tonga.
Policy?
All right. So what I want to say is physically it's still in play. But what I want to say is that it's become more tradition than it's actually understood. If you understand what I'm saying, like people seem to be just at least from my experience in Samoa, we go through the motions, and I mean, like with Nico's example, that's a really huge. So if we were doing something like that with the head of state right now in Samoa, then of course everything would be represented and everything would be, understood at least on some kind of level. But there is a level of the youth and the younger generation who are just going through the motions that I feel like without understanding completely what's going on. So while the practice is still in place, I mean, honestly, from my experience, I've understood a lot more than most people would because I've actually gone out and sought the information for myself and educated myself on what's going on. Whereas I've been in situations with, my uncles or aunts who, although they've been through the motions before, they don't know exactly what's going on. And I mean, a simple example is just a normal falabilave, like a funeral where you show up and then you're supposed to, be able to give a CE and then, receive the family that shows up. And sometimes we just go through the motions without knowing why we're doing it. And that's the biggest problem for me is that, if you're coming from the perspective of somebody like me who wants to know everything that's going on with the culture, and then you don't have that many sources that you can go to for why we do the things that you do, it can be really, really hard because obviously the practices are all still in place, but finding a mentor who actually knows what's going on and can explain to you, especially in English. I mean, sometimes people will say things in Samoan that don't, they describe the atmosphere of what's going on, but they don't go into detail so much. So there can be a kind of, what I want to say is it can leave you with something desired at the end. I mean, you can feel like, there's more that I could have understood there, but it wasn't all there for me. But yeah, definitely the hierarchy is still there. If the chief that is at the very, very top paramount of the village is not there, then somebody sits at his place as a representative from him, either, the son or one of the chiefs, but it's always done in that. And like Nico said, every time we do something of cultural importance, everybody is acknowledged. Like our falupenga, no matter what we do, whether it be an ava ceremony or a funeral, everybody is acknowledged because we don't know who's always there and we don't know who they represent. So by reciting the falupenga, we cover all bases, but at the same time, it's there's a duality in it where you realize that we may be perpetuating a practice that we don't fully understand, and that's why it's great we have this forum so that people who are looking for that kind of conversation have some place to come. But yeah, thank you for the question.